Here we go. Okay.
Go.
Oh.
All right. We are back once again. This is a series of candidate forums where we are the Washington State Association of Head Start and ECAP. We are a C3 organization that represents Head Start and ECAP providers, staff, parents, and of course we advocate for the children in the program. And we've been doing a series of these candidate forums over the last month. They've been great. Been super happy with them. And again, I'm Joel. I'm the executive director of the association. April is our parent ambassador program manager, and we have some of our other parent leaders on this call. And we have a staff person from your district, Scarlett, who will participate too. So that's really cool. These forums have been about 30 minutes. We have a set series of questions. And then if there's time remaining at the end, we give you an opportunity to wrap up, but also to see if anyone else has follow-up questions or anything else. So anyway, so let's get started. And our first question is just to have you introduce yourself and share why you were interested in coming to a forum specific on children and families. And so we'll start there.
Okay.
You're welcome. And thanks for doing this too.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, and by the way, I should say this is Ingrid Anderson, who's running for the state Senate in the 5th legislative district.
So I am a mom, which makes this very relevant. My son just turned 6 this week, so he's in kindergarten virtually right now. I'm also a nurse and a community advocate. So my main background in nursing is primarily emergency medicine. However, I also specialize as a psychiatric nurse, and I'm nearly done with my graduate degree to become a psychiatric nurse practitioner because mental health is such a need in our community. And we are really behind at having an adequate healthcare around mental health. I also am trained, and for over a decade now, I have been a sexual assault forensic nurse examiner. I do specialize in people who are 14 and over, so I do not specialize in pediatrics, but I have had some training in it. But we try to adults or teenagers. So my background in becoming active and why I ran is because I saw the deep structural issues in our healthcare system. And so I volunteered as the Washington State Nurses Association Vice Chair of the Political Action Committee, so I could help bring my perspectives to Olympia and talk to people who work in the state Senate and the House of Representatives to have meaningful change. And one of the things that I found was, well, there's many good intentioned people. If you don't have the hands-on experience and the intimate knowledge of how some of these systems are, the legislation that you may try to pass doesn't always translate to improved outcomes. And that's something that is just very important right now in our healthcare field. And as you know, in early learning and education as well. So I found that it was time to step up for new leadership, somebody who would listen to the people, somebody who would listen to the teachers, the nurses, the people doing the work, all of the different educators who are out there who are impacting our children and our communities and the overall health of our community. I was able to get a lot of very good legislation passed. However, the incumbent at the time was often a roadblock. And I found that it was time to step up and do more. And so here I am.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Yuval, who will moderate our forum tonight. So thanks.
Thanks, Joel. So our warm-up question for you today is based around since our forum is focused on young children and families, what was your favorite children's book growing up and why?
Gosh, I loved all of the Narnia books. All of those. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is probably one of my favorites because it challenges the young child's mind to just think of endless possibilities. And I think it's really important to encourage creativity.
Thank you. And a lot of our questions today will be asked by some of the parents that are here. And so first up, we have Scarlett.
Hi, I'm Scarlett. I'm from your district.
Nice. Awesome.
I'm a mom of 2 young children, and I'm a UW alumni. I want to ask you, what is your definition of early learning?
So I guess that's a work in progress, right? But we're learning from the moment we leave the womb. As our neurodevelopment is expanding, we are always learning, and that's the beauty of it. Early learning in the educational field, my son started his school like Montessori school at the age of 3. But before that, I was doing speech language learning at home through some of the amazing home care systems that we have for young youth who are having difficulty speaking. And so we had lots of different learning from a very young age. So I think it starts from the moment you enter this world, right? You learn to eat, you learn to express your needs, you learn to communicate even before you have words to communicate with your providers. And so right away.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Lizzie.
Hooray for technical difficulties. Research shows that the investment in comprehensive early learning education pays off particularly for disadvantaged children and families. ECAP is a high learning comprehensive early learning service that services most at-risk families. Do you support an increase in ECAP funding? Why or why not?
Absolutely. It's a critical investment, and the benefit you get to the overall health of the community is hands down just the wisest money we can spend, right? Because it helps make it so that children are not falling behind. It makes it so that they have a better chance at being productive members of society, and reduces the costs in the long run on so many different levels. Also, if you start doing appropriate early learning, you can also identify children who may have different neurodevelopment things like autism or speech development, and then you give them a chance to excel. So it's absolutely an important investment, and one that we should not be skimping on.
Thank you. Faye?
Hi. So childcare providers are some of the lowest paid workers, oftentimes making less than parking lot attendants and dog walkers, while families struggle to afford and find affordable care. What will you do to make childcare more affordable for families and increase wages and benefits?
So I am learning about this as we go along, but it's my understanding that there's 3 main ways that childcare providers get compensated, right? It's through the Head Start, if I'm not mistaken, the WCCC, as well as private pay, correct? And my understanding is that the compensation that we have is subpar and not meeting the expectations. So a lot of providers can't afford to keep their shop open, and then there's limited care. And so then private pay ends up, monopolizing the market. So there's very few seats available for so many different kids. I know I had to be on a wait list for nearly a year. And then when I had to pay for that, it was a stretch, and both my husband and I are in healthcare. I can't even begin to imagine the other families where it's a single income. I think of a single mom working at the grocery store and how hard that is. My mom was also a paraeducator, and so while she was with the school system, at times she also worked for other groups, and I saw the difference of pay that made, and I found that to be unacceptable. I think the state needs to fight to give better reimbursement rates so that we can secure placement for people who are maybe a little disadvantaged economically, because we should not have this huge socioeconomic divide. Children should not have to bear that burden. Parents are working hard enough just to take care of them. And I think this is a good opportunity for the state to step in and create better reimbursement so that we can have more facilities and better pay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Kylie?
Hi. So only 5% of Washington state's eligible families are receiving home visiting from federal, state, and local funding. leaving many families unserved. What are your plans to support pregnant moms and allow families with newborn children? Also, are you going to work towards expanding policies around paid family leave, early ECAP, and home visiting?
So that's a lot of questions in one, but I would say I would be a fierce advocate. We used to have a really good system a long time ago with home health nurses. In fact, one of the people I used to work with on the Washington State Nurses Association PAC board actually implemented many, many years ago this home nursing system where they would go before when they were 6 months pregnant or so and give education and information on nutrition, how to take care of a baby. And then they would also do visits after the baby was born. And the data that came from that was astounding. Babies who were even premature ended up developing at an appropriate level and coming up to be in the right percentile at a reasonable within 1 year. And they found that the child abuse rates were almost non-existent because the support system these moms needed. I would absolutely advocate for that because, as you know, the data shows that when you make these investments up front, it saves so much money in the long run. As far as all the different programs, what were the other questions?
Paid family leave, early learning, and home visiting.
Yes.
Just funding some policies around that, those specific programs.
I think those are all very important. I don't have specific programs, legislation drafted at this time. I would definitely lean on you to help me guide on that and what you think would be appropriate for our communities. I know that there is a great need, but I don't have specific answers. But I'm not going to pretend to know everything. I think that's when you network with groups like yourself so that you can make sure that you have important legislation that actually translates to good care.
Thank you.
Faye?
Thank you. So prior to COVID-19, 1 in 11 children were homeless. Due to the pandemic, we've seen an increase in homeless children and families. What will you do to ensure children have safe and stable housing?
There's a lot of different things that we need to do. First, we need to look at our zoning laws. And one of the things that I think we should be able to do is make it accessible for people to create ADUs onto their houses, which is an accessory dwelling unit. Not only does this provide another level of housing out in the market that is cheaper than owning a house, it also helps people who own a house who barely can get by have extra income. So this could potentially really open up the market with another level of housing. We also need to look at our investments in the Housing Trust Fund and finding ways to secure affordable housing as we're working with different groups and stakeholder groups to assure that the affordable housing that is put out on the market isn't just flipped over immediately. And instead, if somebody sells or moves out of that kind of housing situation, that it is then in turn continued to be passed on to people in need.
Thank you. Lizzie? Lizzie, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I keep having issues with my my connection or something. Let me see, where did it go? Okay. What will you do to ensure that every child has access to the best available medical, mental health, and dental care?
I think that's why we need somebody who has a healthcare background in the state Senate, somebody who's not taking corporate PAC money, and I'm not taking any money from insurance companies, because what I have seen is time and time again, they dictate how healthcare is delivered. And I think that's unacceptable. I think we need healthcare people in the state Senate who are willing to stand up to corporate interests and insurance companies, and somebody who will advocate for better accessibility. There's a study group going on right now and how to deliver and potentially bring universal or a one-payer system to Washington State. They are supposed to be releasing their findings that they've been working on for about a year now in November. And so I'm really eager to see that and what their suggestions are in creating a more equitable healthcare system where we can have delivery. And I think one of the key things that we also have to look at is just because you have insurance, it doesn't translate to accessibility or affordability of healthcare. And I have seen time and time again, especially with youth and mental health, if you don't have the right insurance or an astronomical amount of money to put down, you will not be able to access a mental health bed. And that's for adults and children, but even harder for children because there's so few beds out there available. So I have seen this issue happen time and time again where we would accept a medical patient based on ability or inability to pay. However, if you're a psychiatric patient and you don't have the right insurance, they expect a down payment of over $8,000 to get hospitalized. That's unacceptable. So we not only need to hold our insurance companies at a higher standard until we do get some better system, but we also need to hold our hospitals at a different kind of accountability. And there's other ways that we can also increase the amount of providers that are taking state care so that you're not having to wait several months to see a specialist if you're on Apple Care or one of the state subsidized medical benefits. There's ways that we can help incentivize that so we get more providers in the program.
Thank you. April?
Hello, nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Early learning is about 1% of our state's budget. In your opinion, is the state of Washington investing sufficiently in early childhood education?
Not at all. Nowhere near. No, that's an easy answer.
Thank you.
Nowhere close.
Thank you. Nearly 1 in 5 children do not get enough to eat in the U.S. What is your plan to ensure all children and youth get the nutrition they require?
I'd love to hear your ideas on this. Some things that I know that we could do better on is I think we should be eliminating the stigma of some of the lower socioeconomic people in our schools and the inability to pay and lunch tabs. I think should be abolished. I think that if somebody is in lower income, that there should be no need to pay at all for these food services. That's something that we can absolutely step in as a state to help out. Beyond that, I would be really open to hear how maybe we could expand our WIC program. I know I worked at a grocery store for 10 years before I became a nurse, and I saw people struggle with having to put food back on the shelf because they could not pay. I saw a lot of struggle with people who felt like there was a stigma when they brought out their EBT card. There's a lot of things that we can do to help reduce that and to help provide better access. But I'd also be open to hear what your guys' ideas are on that.
Thank you. And thank you for hanging in there with us. We are going to now transition into our last question before we open it up for Q&A. And the last question will be asked by Joel.
I actually have two questions since we have a little bit of time, but I'm curious, what during this whole pandemic, I think it's clear that we've seen some inequities in the public education system. And I'm kind of curious to see, where do you see the biggest holes and what would be your top priorities around K-12 education?
Well, I'm still learning about where the biggest holes are. I think even our teachers are learning where those biggest holes are. But we know people with socioeconomic, people who are lower socioeconomic status are struggling the most. One of the things I was talking to some teachers with earlier this week was how so many of the high school and middle school students are really struggling because maybe they were teased and not doing well in these education systems before, but now all of their classmates have a perspective to what their house looks like and whether it's chaotic or whether it's fancy or not, whether there's other kids running around in the background. It's very vulnerable for a lot of people who may not have the luxury of a nice home or a quiet environment. I know that there are students who are setting up their Zoom meetings in a garage, in a woodshed. I mean, these are just some very hard realities that we're looking at. I also see a lot of high needs in our special ed students. There's a lot of people who cannot get the benefit from an online learning. And I like that the school systems are planning on phasing them in sooner, but some of them don't have a very strong plan at this point. And so what we need to do is we need to find ways that we can protect our teachers and our students with proper PPE and proper spaces to have these classes so we can bring our most vulnerable in first. So we really do need to do a triage system of those people who are going to fall through those cracks the soonest. And I would really lean on you as well as the WEA for advisement on what that looks like.
Thank you, Ingrid. Joel, there's a question that kind of piggybacks off of this. So Kylie, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. What are you going to do to make sure that all children have access to high quality before and after school care and also summer care?
I'd probably be working with Tana Sen on this because she's advanced some great legislation. And I really think of her as a role model as being a child advocate and good legislation and trying to get that across. But I think some of the issues that we're seeing is finding more legislative representatives who are willing to stand up and support that, not just be a yes vote, but somebody who will be a champion for drafting legislation that can meet those needs, but it really comes to funding, right? That's one of the biggest issues. So we have, as you know, the most upside down regressive tax code in the US. And some of the representatives are unwilling to do what it takes to create more equitable income for our state. And that's what we need right now. So I think we need somebody who's willing to stand up to corporations and close those corporate loopholes so that we can have more finance, some more money coming into our state so we can make the right investments. We also need to look at other forms of revenue, especially now because our budget is so tight. One of the things that I've been looking at is proposing a capital gains tax so that we can use that income to reinvest in our children, in our healthcare, in our mental health. Those are the key areas that I think we will get a really good turnaround on. So we need the money to support these programs. And I think I'm the one who will do that.
Thank you. I think you answered my last question, which was going to be around revenue and the fact that we're coming in to January with a really difficult budget situation. So it seems like you're open to progressive revenue. How would you prioritize? I mean, I'm assuming some things will have to be cut, even if there are progressive revenue options on the table. What's your thinking about how would you go about this process of meeting the budget?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that I've heard from other people who are opposing progressive revenue is they say it'll take too long. And it will. If you do cap gains or close the corporate loopholes, it'll probably take 1 to 2 years to see that revenue. So in the interim, we still have to be looking at what kind of budget cuts are there going to be. With that said, as you guys probably have seen, the last revenue forecast was half of what we initially expected it to be. And we still have not received the next round of federal stimulus. So we also do not know where that will leave us. I've talked to many other senators who are in office right now who are hopeful that with the next round of federal money that we will have to make very few cuts. I can promise the things that I will not cut are resources to our most vulnerable populations in our communities. It is unacceptable to come in with an austerity mindset because we found in 2008, when that approach was taken, it prolonged our economic recovery and some families are still hurting to this day. So what I can commit to is that I will not cut the resources of our most vulnerable families and individuals in our state. And I will put a focus on maintaining and excelling healthcare, access to good quality education. And those are the things that are super, super important for our communities to become healthy.
Great. Thank you. Looks like you have a question here in the chat. Let's see.
Yeah.
David Sabat says, what capital gains will you target? Real estate or cap gains on corporations in Washington like Amazon and Microsoft?
So there's a lot of different cap gains. Some of the legislation has already been put forward, and part of it was to offset the dependence on property taxes. So this was put forward I believe it was in 2019. And it was to offset our dependence on levies for the school system. But it also would close not just corporate loopholes in some of the tax breaks that they've been given over the years, but also look on passive revenue over, and that amount is variable. At one point, it was suggested to be over 200,000 of passive revenue. And there's exemptions you can make. So you would exempt the sale of a primary residence, this retirement and stocks and bonds, the sale of a small business. There are certain things that you could exempt to make sure that families were not getting an undue burden on this. But looking at that passive income over 200 could cause quite a bit of income for our state, as well as that corporate loophole. It's okay to give corporations tax breaks here and there if they are directly tied to an investment in the community, like good jobs that they commit to, but they should also have a period of review. So it's not this endless tax break where we're not seeing a benefit. I'm not okay with that.
Thank you. Was there, before we give Ingrid
Scarlett
a
had
chance to close up, is there a final question, or
Scarlett had a
Scarlett, did you have
question.
something?
Yes, I have a question. Me and my family experienced homeless in 2018, and we all worked so hard with the homeless childcare grace period bill in the last legislative sections. The bill is to ensure a homeless family would have 12-month childcare while the homeless families are looking for stable housing and childcare. Especially, we all know the childcare wait list is ridiculously long in some cities. So my question is, would you have any plans to make it further? And if you do, what's your plan?
I didn't know about that legislation, so that's really great. I thought I had heard rumor about that, but what bill, do you remember the bill number by chance?
We don't. Representative Lisa Callan was the sponsor.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can talk with her about it.
And was there a sunset period, or was it indefinite?
It's an indefinite bill. It allows for 12 months of a grace period from a work activity while a homeless family is finding housing or work, so they can make sure they get childcare. But there are some, the department, DCYF, has created a cooling off period. So once you're after the 12-month period, you're basically out of luck. So that there's some hurdles that you have to get through. And so we're trying to keep improving it.
Yeah.
Bill 1303.
What was it?
1303.
Thank you. And what, Scarlett, you said you have utilized this. What would, in your experience, what do you find would have changed the outcome or helped?
I think, and the childcare, especially the because the wait list is too long, and also not all family can find a childcare center that can fit this working schedule.
Yeah.
Because a lot of low-income family work at night.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for them to look for childcare at night, and then they have to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would almost be incentivizing and working with the groups who run the childcares, finding ways to incentivize them to have different kinds of hours available.
Yes, and also it's really hard for immigrant family too. Immigrant family, if they become homeless, they don't have any social benefit. They just get out, like they have to rely on themselves. And that is pretty sad that they have to survive without anything support. That part too. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, as a nurse, they've taught us a lot about recognizing the social determinants of health and the impacts that they can have on the whole person. So one of the things that I like the most about the nursing education is we don't just focus on the medical, physical, but we focus on the spiritual, the holistic person, the mental components, and how that also translates into all walks of life as far as education and how you function as a member of society. And I don't have all the answers for all these things, but what I do have is the understanding and the empathy that so many people are hurting and struggling. I had a untypical trajectory when I was younger, and I had some learning disabilities that I had to get through. And at one point, I was a high school dropout, and I had to go back to school and an alternative high school, and I didn't graduate till the age of 20. But it was because I got resources from my community, and people came behind me to help me, is why I am here today. And that's what I want to bring to other families and other people who are going through struggles, because the investments, they're so valuable. And it can help more than just that one family. It helps everybody that they're around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I don't know if there are any other questions before we ask Ingrid just to say a few words to close?
I don't really have a question. I have a comment. So when you
Yeah,
were talking
Sharice.
about, yeah, sorry, I snuck in a little late.
Okay.
Cool.
But
You're
when you
here.
were talking about the disparities, like with the free lunch, I just want to also put in there that some school districts, the disparity goes even further about the kid just getting lunch for the day, but it also goes with some kids being able to graduate because they hold that as a fine, right?
I have heard that. I
Yeah.
have heard that they'll hold your transcripts and all kinds of stuff. Is
So
that-
I just want to say that it's a little deeper than just them getting lunch. Like it really does hinder, especially some of these lower income families, the
Yeah.
ability for those kids to even reach outside of their boundaries, right? To even think about
Yeah.
college. So I just want to throw it out there. That's a little.
That should be an easy fix to advocate for. Oh my gosh.
But kudos on the mental health. I don't know if I was able to keep doing the hand claps and the hearts, but
Yeah, gosh. You know, I was sitting in the gallery, it was in 2019, and I heard them arguing a bill about that issue. And I did not realize that that was still an ongoing issue. That's
where it
acceptable.
also impacted a lot of parents with the use of the technology. It's like if you can hold
Yeah.
a transcript over $2.20, just imagine with that computer. So like with a lot of my parents, they didn't want to get that computer because they were afraid. So
Yeah.
just saying, like it goes even bigger. And thank you for the last, I'm gonna stop.
Oh, no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, thank you for letting me know about that.
Any other questions at all?
I actually had a question.
Good, April.
If elected, what committees are you hoping to sit on?
So I want to be on all the committees pretty much, but that are most important to me, obviously, are healthcare, and then the behavioral health and early learning, K through 12. Those things are just at the top of my mind. As a nurse and as a mom, I feel like I would have the best impact on those committees. But there's a lot that I would also love to be a part of. I'd love to be the part of the workforce development and environment and labor, because that's something that I think is really important to bring that perspective to our state Senate, somebody who can advocate for our older students in high school. Not everybody fits the 4-year college template, right? And so many people feel like if they don't do that, that there's nothing else, which is such a lie, because there are so many amazing apprenticeships out there in the labor field that give you a good living wage while you're learning an amazing skill and an amazing trade. And I think we need to really vamp that up to give a lot of opportunity for other people who are not college bound in the traditional sense.
Thank you. I just threw that one in there. It wasn't.
There's a lot of good committees. But healthcare and education are really where I'm at.
That's great. Well, would you like to end by just, giving us your final closing thoughts, or whatever you would like to?
I am excited to talk to you guys quite a bit more after I win, because it sounds like you guys are deep in this, and I think that's amazing, because we need advocates out there, but we need advocates who are also in the seat. And I find that While there's some who are amazing, in the state Senate, it's a little bit harder to get some of this legislation passed. And we need somebody who's going to be not just a yes vote that you drag across the line, but somebody who'll be a champion and bring other representatives to the table to sign off on this legislation. And that's what I plan on bringing to the table.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, and we wish you best with your campaign. We will send you after this is over, probably either late tonight or